Hey, and tonight we're back with one of my favorite formats of all time. We're back for Rise of the Eldrazi. It's the last set of the Zendikar block, and it's meant to be drafted 3 on its own. It kind of turns everything around. The Zendikar block was mostly limited-wise about as many little dudes as you could get going as fast as you could. Rise of the Eldrazi is about getting things like 8/8s and other craziness. Other formats would call a huge creature a bomb. Rise of the Eldrazi kind of just says, great, how many more do you have? For example, Gigantomancer here. It costs 8 mana, but then you can pay 1 to turn any creature you have into a 7/7 until end of turn. That's pretty darn good. Beastbreaker of Bala Ged's essentially a 4/4 that you get for 2, or at least a 4/4 on the next turn. Ondu Giant's very good. Ramp. Stagger Shock is particularly good removal that casts itself twice. Hero's reasonable removal because it works on some of the bigger stuff. Domestication is back in M14 apparently, and it's a mind control that's only works on small creatures permanently. Alright, so Gigantomancer is very good. Green is generally accepted to be the best color in this set because it's full of huge things, and green has more of the ramp. So we're going to go ahead and start out with Gigantomancer and see where we go from there. As always, the usual thing. I'm going to try not to just marry the pick, but it's very good. Okay. Somebody left me a Hedron Field Purist. They must like me. Growth Spasm is very good. Again, it is a ramp, and it kind of ramps you too. Dawnglare Invoker is 8 mana for tap all creatures target player controls. Notably, you generally have to attack to be able to win a game, so that's a pretty good ability. A couple other notables, but Hedron Field Purist is very, very good. It reduces damage to you and all creatures you control once you level it up a little, and that's just a huge effect. Growth Spasm is very tempting, but I'm going to take Hedron Field Purist. Just the first couple picks in, it's generally good to pick whatever the most important, whatever the strongest card in the pack is. Hedron Field Purist is it. This pack too. All right, starting off with 2 of these, I'm increasingly likely to play white. Hand of Emrakul is very rarely playable. Wall of Omens is good. I'd love it if it wheeled. Totem Guide Heartbeast is just fine. McKinney Griffin's alright. This is probably the order I want them in. Purist, Omens, Heartbeast, Griffin, like I said. Other than that, Skywatcher Adept is very good. Zulaport Enforcer is fine. White and blue tend to have the bulk of the levelers. Black kind of has a little of all of the other archetypes. It's got a little bit of ramp, a little bit of levelers, and it's got removal. So black kind of finds its place by just not specializing, but having enough good cards that it's okay. Emergence Gate is fine. So yeah, we're increasingly set on being white, especially after these 2 Purists. Purist isn't as good as Gigantomancer. If they were both in the pack, I would take the Gigantomancer. Purists are very, very good. If we got both of them online and all the way leveled up, it would be -4 to all damage to anything, which is pretty good. Kabir Vindicator similarly gives all of my creatures +1/+1 or +2/+2. It's slow, it costs a lot of mana, but it's really strong. We're not seeing much green. We haven't seen much yet. Tajuro Preserver's okay. It's good against like Eldrazi and some of the big stuff, but Vindicator is just very strong. Puncturing Light's fine. Evolving Wilds is fine. We know that we're being fed a lot of very good white cards from the right, so white is a very safe place to be. That's a really late Nest Invader. There's a chance that green is not entirely shut off, or this could just have been a very green pack. Oust is also decent removal. It puts the creature second from the top, which means if it's indestructible or has auras, then it still goes there. However, I'm not entirely convinced that I'm not going to be white, and Oust is kind of a replaceable thing. I would be as happy with a guard duty most of the time. So I'm going to go ahead and take the Nest Invader just because it's definitely the strongest effect there. Demystify is a very good sideboard card. Spider Umbra is fine. Spider Umbra is good against the blue-white levelers. We notably haven't been seeing much blue. So I would be okay with either of these two cards. Harmless Assault's an okay combat trick. This is a very weak pack, so either of these two. There's a chance that I could pick up some of the creatures that get better with Umbras in green-white. That is one thing that the two share, so I'm going to take the Umbra slightly over the other. Naturalize would be nice, but I like Guard Duty. Guard Duty is one of the best ways to stop a Eldrazi. Okay, we knew that this was a good pack for green, but getting a Beastbreaker back this late on the wheel, I think? Yeah, on the wheel is impressive, and probably a sign that green is not terrible. Green's been cut some. I'm not entirely positive, but that's a very good sign. Escape Null is the best card in the pack. Harmless Assault is not the worst combat trick. It's kind of a fog plus. But I'm going to take Leaf Arrow. It's good against the blue aggro decks, which you can tell is an interesting format when blue-white is the strongest aggro deck. But gonna be happy with what I've got here. Okay. Ancient Stirrings can help you find lands and Eldrazi's and such. I don't think Escape Null is strong enough to splash, so I'm just gonna go ahead and keep taking green. Ancient Stirrings is one of those cards, like, it mostly just cycles. It helps mana fix a little bit, but not great. So it's something that I could definitely fill playables with. This just gains life. So I'll go ahead and take the card that I said is a decent combat trick. Probably go ahead and hide it. Okay, so even with green, we've got a leveler. 4 levelers, we could definitely go somewhere off of that. Haze Frog is not great, but not terrible. There are times when you want to fog, and it's a frog. And again, I have my superstition. I always like it when I end up with whatever basic land I'm drafting, because for some reason, I always feel like whatever basic land I get is the color that was really open. Okay. Disaster Radius is kind of a one-sided wrath. That's pretty good. Emergent Scathed, again, will give your creature's protection, and we'll do it twice. There's some good red removal that might be worth splashing, but Kozilek's Predator is a decent creature that helps ramp. It's a 3/3 for 4, and it gives you 2 Eldrazi spawn that you can sacrifice for mana. So that's probably best here. Totem Guide Heartbeast is fine. Icaral Outrider is really not impressive, but I'm going to be happy with Predator. Bramble Snap is very good if we get a bunch of little guys. Again, Oust is removal, but the two things most interesting to me are Nest Invader and Ondu Giant. Both ramp. Ondu Giant mana fixes. Ondu Giant ramps via land. Nest Invader ramps via Eldrazi spawn. I'm not actually positive which is right. Green does have more interactions with some of Eldrazi tokens. For example, there's a creature that buffs all of your Eldrazi spawn tokens so that they actually matter for combat. And I like getting my mana early as much as possible. So I'm going to go ahead and take the Nest Invader. 2/2 beatdown's fine. I mean, it's a bear, but it also ramps. So it's definitely a very good creature. I'm not positive of that versus Ondu Giant. It's kind of one question I've never really known the answer to. So yeah, despite mentioning that green is widely renowned as the strongest color, it seems to be at least reasonably open, especially from this side. We're only a couple of picks into the pack, so it's hard to tell, but there's a decent amount still. Okay, could be another Career Vindicator is very, very good. It's very expensive, so it's still tough, but this does interact well with all of these Eldrazi spawn we've got, so that's another good reason to like it. Another Flame Slash, so it's decent removal. Again, Caravan Escort is one of those that's not great. Snake Umbra is fine. It is one of the better Umbras, but it's not... I don't think it's on this nearly the same power level as Vindicator. These are some of the best levelers that, besides like Student of Warfare and some of those that are really hard to find. Okay, if we're going to be ramping, being able to spend 8 mana is very, very good. Spending 8 mana to give +5/+5 and trample makes combat a nightmare for your opponent. Otherwise, Evolving Wilds would be just fine, but we haven't seen enough to convince us to splash. Flame Slash would be fine, but somebody's happy if they kill a Wild Heart Invoker with a Flame Slash. It's very good, and we're just ramping to it and using it that way. So it seems strong enough. Notably, with Hedron Field Purists and Kabira Vindicators, we definitely benefit from having a creature-heavy deck. And green and white tend to be creature-heavy, but it's worth noting at least. Okay, so nothing is too amazing here. Stomper Cub's fine. Icarol Outrider's fine. Naturalize would be a good sideboard card. I'm thinking Stomper Cub might be my slight preference. One problem is that, like, that super defensive creature, a lot, like I said earlier, the most aggressive decks tend to be the blue-white decks, which conveniently tend to have lots of flyers. So having a 1/6 or whatever it was on the ground doesn't necessarily get there. At least Hedron Field Purist is going to reduce the damage that they're doing. Okay, this is the guy I was talking about, Broodmorton, or Lady, or whatever this is. It buffs all of our Eldrazi spawn into 2/2s, so it works very well with the Nest Invaders and the Predator that we have. We definitely want to get more Eldrazi spawn, but this is going to go very well with it. I also really like Aura Gnarlid. It's a very good card in the Aura deck. Green-white Auras is definitely a thing, but our deck is already built to use Brood Warden. I'm going to go ahead and hide Stomper Cub, by the way, just because I'd rather play things like Brood Warden. Bramble Snap is a very good card when you have a creature-heavy deck, which, again, is kind of what we're trying for. It is another way of making combat difficult for your opponent, just because they can't be sure how willing you are to tap all your creatures to buff it. So you kind of have that threat of activation. Devastating Summons is a very strong effect. It's not necessarily... It's hard to tell how good it'll be because it's really easy to get blown out by it. But it's definitely a very strong effect. Raid Bombardment is very good with Eldrazi tokens, but we don't have enough to really splash that. I think Devastating Summons is the strongest effect, such that I'm willing to take it. Okay, Skitter Invasion would actually be quite decent, because it gives you 5 Eldrazi spawn, but it's hard to argue with Emerge Unscathed. With double Emerge Unscathed, it's going to be really hard for people to reliably use removal against us. Similarly, it works very well against some of the enchantments and stuff. Alright, we're getting fed really good late cards with another Bramble Snap. Like I said, Snake Umbra is fine. It lets us draw cards if we hit an opponent with the creature, so it's worth having. It's not great in this deck because we don't really have evasive creatures yet, but there's potential for that in white. Gloomhunter is fine. Crab Umbra is not the worst. I think I'm more afraid of Gloomhunter, though it's hard to be sure. Okay, great. A late Naturalize. I really wanted that. Sporecap Spider gives us a game against the Flyers deck. So it seems like green is really open from our left, and white is really open from our right. So I'm really happy with where we're at. Devastating Summons is almost certainly not going to be played just because, you know, it's a gamble, and it's splashing for a gamble, but it's still very good, so I'm leaving it there just in case. We'll see. Okay. Palaka Worm is a really absurd uncommon. It gains 7 life, and when it dies, it draws a card. Oh yeah, and it's a 7/7 trample. I'd love to pick up some smites. We passed some white removal, and it's kind of getting late to get as much as I'd like, but Palaka Worm is a great way to win a game, especially when we've got a bit of ramping stuff. Speaking of ramp, Ondu Giant versus Growth Spasm versus Guard Duty for some removal. Wall of Omens would be okay at helping keep us alive, and Puncturing Light similarly would help keep us alive. But so this is just a very, very strong pack all in all. I think Ondu Giant is a slightly better card, but I think I like Growth Spasm just because we have the Vindicators, we have the Brood Warden. I think there's just enough synergy there that it's worth giving it a shot. Isn't this card worth something? I'm not sure. Okay, the only other things here, Demystify, Traitorous Instinct, Elend Umbra. None of these are great. I'm curious about Nirkana Revenant. I don't actually really think it's worth something, but I'm curious. Also, I really don't want that to be played against me in a format where ramping matters. I'm going to go ahead and check that. Yeah, it looks like Nirkana Revenant was actually worth a couple of bucks, which is something I'm very happy to take. Guard Duty is okay. I like Guard Duty more in the decks where you have flyers, just because you can make their creatures, their Eldrazi and such, defend, and then you've take it to the air and take care of them. However, sometimes we don't have the luxury of having better removal. I'd like Corpse Hatch, I'd like Induce Despair, but I'm not sure I'm willing to splash for them. I think it's safer to take the more reliable card, even if it's a weaker effect here. Alright, I've been wanting Ondu Giants the whole draft, so I'm going to go ahead and take one finally. Praise Vengeance is fine. Boar Umber is good for 3/3 for, +3/+3, and Totem Armor for 3. Core Line Slinger is fine. It wants to be removal, but it's only really good against the Flyers decks, more or less. So, Boar Umbra is probably the pick here. It's nice to make some of our creatures suddenly more of a threat. Alright, I said I wanted Skittering Invasion, and here it is. I would care more if we had another Brood Warden, but, you get what you have. Okay, so Reinforced Bulwark or Eel Umbra are the two things that are most scary. There is a deck based around Defenders, if you're not really familiar with the format. I think we will have more trouble with the Totem Armor, even though there's a million things that give Totem Armor. Pathrazer of Ulamog. I'm not sure that we need another high-end finisher. We've got Wild Heart, Invoker, Palaka Worm, and Gigantomancer as good finishers. Brood Warden's actually not bad. But I'm going to go ahead and take Pathrazer because it's the thing that we're most likely to use of those. Alright, another Guard Duty. Again, not perfect, but it can. We've got some good late-game power, so it can kind of help keep us alive until then. Okay, so we've got 28 cards here. We've definitely got some cuts we can make. Devastating Sun. Spider Umbra, I'll definitely side in against certain decks, but definitely don't need it main deck. Demystify is another good sideboard. Okay. So, need to make a few more cuts. Spore Cap Spider is okay, but it's really only good against the flyer deck. Shared Discovery is something that I've seen LSV splash, and it seems really decent. I actually wouldn't mind splashing that since we've got Growth Spasm and Undo Giant to fix. It's not as much as I'd like. I probably won't bother running it just because we have a lot of powerful cards in our colors, but it's something I'm willing to consider. I'm going to go ahead and put in all the obvious cards. Sporecap Spider is a maybe. Snake Umbra is a maybe, I guess. Growth Spasm, Boar Umbra. Okay, so these are all the cards that I know I want. Oh, and that. Pathrazor, Sporecap, Snake Umbra are all options. But we do have 23. A lot of times people will be playing 18 land decks, especially, you know, we've got a million levelers, we've got a million huge guys, or a decent number of huge guys. Despite how many despite how many ramp cards we have, I think we might want to actually go to 18. So I'm thinking we want to go ahead and just not play those. I'd rather not cut a creature just because 15 is not a bad place to be, especially since Vindicators and all that want as many creatures as we can get. That said, I guess Skitter Invasion counts as creatures. Growth Spasm gives you at least a creature. Not sure if Guard Duty or Emerged Unscathed is better. I think Emerged Unscathed might be. I think it might be best for me to cut a Guard Duty in the main deck and side into it if I really need to. I said we don't have a ton of removal. Is there anything else I'd be willing to cut? I could maybe cut up Brandon Bolt Snap. I'm going to try the deck like this, having cut that Guard Duty, and see how it looks. This is not as many high-end cards as I've ramped to before. The Kavira Vindicator does cost a ton to level up, and it is worth leveling up. So are the purists. If that was not the case, I would be really tempted to not go 18 lands, but I think I'm gonna just because of that. All right. Okay, so it wants us to have heavier force because of Wildheart Invoker and Palaka Worm and Brood Warden. Okay, these are all very good cards, but we don't generally need them turn 1 or 2 or 3. So 3 or 4, maybe. So that means that early on we do mostly just need green. I think I'm going to go with 10-8, just because I don't want to cut too low. I definitely want to be able to turn 3 purists when I have the option. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and start it with this, and we'll see how it goes.